Welcome, everybody. I'm Dreama Gentry, Executive Director of Partners for Education, and welcome to our July Rural Library Network Conversation for Action. And I had to think for a minute. It is July. I was on vacation last week, and I came back, and it's July. So glad you can join us today. We've got an exciting topic for me. I love grants and I love thinking about funding, and I love thinking about libraries. So today I'm joined by Emilie Castle. Hi, Emilie. Emilie, if you say hello and where you're from, folks can see you.
Hi, everyone. It's Emilie here. I am actually from the UK, about 2 hours north of London, but currently living in the DC area.
And Emilie, tell us a little bit about the role that you have now and the work you're doing, and that'll lead us into our topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the Director of Product Management and Reporting and Analytics for the E-rate program normally, but more recently I have been running the, of course, in collaboration and taking guidance from the FCC, the Emergency Connectivity Fund program. So it's a very exciting time. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to support our schools and libraries in this way. And, you know, obviously from the report and order, there is a good amount of overlap between the two programs. So that's definitely come in handy as we work to create the ECF portal that you all are using to submit your application.
Great, and I appreciate you joining us in a time that I know is crazy busy because you've just opened up that funding window. What we wanted to do today is to walk through this funding opportunity. We've got some slides here. I'll walk through the slides. Emilie, as I'm going through, if you'd like to chime in, please do so. There'll be time at the end for questions. So you can type your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, or you can just hold them until the end and we'll cover the questions at the end. So I'm going to do what older people, my son tells me older people do, is I'm going to tell you I'm sharing my screen while I'm figuring out how to share my screen. All right, and it will take me a minute to do the slideshow view. All right, Regina, do you see the agenda up? Because I can see your face, so nod if you see it.
I do see the agenda slide up.
Okay, great.
So I'm not for sure why my face is showing, but
it's because you're talking now.
Hello, everybody. So yeah. All right.
And thank you, Regina, for letting me take over this month. And
oh, it's my pleasure. Always glad to have you.
Right. So the agenda today is we'll do sort of a brief introduction to the Emergency Connectivity Fund. Talk about the eligible applicants, and we're doing this today because libraries are one of the eligible applicant pools, and we're really wanting to make sure that you all, our rural libraries around the country, are aware of this opportunity. We'll spend some time talking about the eligible equipment and services, the application process, and then some tips for successful applications. And I will preface this by saying is that this is a new competition. It's a new fund, and we really are sort of going blind at this point because we've never done this before. And so we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks learning about this, and we really are excited to share the knowledge with you all. So the ECF, it's funding to schools and libraries, and it's for the purchase of eligible services and equipment to meet remote learning needs of students, school staff, and patrons. And I think it's really important that you think of this as remote learning and off-campus needs, as opposed to E-rate, where you could actually use the funding with E-rate for things in your library. So this is really around the remote learning needs and off-campus teaching and learning needs. There's $7 million appropriated to this, and it'll be administered via USAC, which is the group that Emilie is connected with. Emilie, anything on the overview, or does that about cover it? All right, she's not shaking her head, but she wants to say something. So, oh, you're muted, Emilie, I'm sorry.
There we go. Sorry about that. A bit slow to get off mute, but no, nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. If not all the funds are exceeded during this filing window, the FCC may actually open an additional subsequent filing window for schools and libraries to seek funding for previously purchased eligible equipment and services. And I think this was done knowing that when the pandemic hit, so many schools and libraries actually used funding to support the remote learning needs of their patrons, of their students. But I also would encourage you not to bet that the money will not be exceeded, and to really step into this quickly and to develop your applications. If the demand exceeds the available funds, requests will be prioritized based on the E-rate discount, with those with higher rates of discount having preference. Emilie, thoughts? I mean, I guess as you all step into this, are you anticipating the funds will be exceeded, or do you really have no idea?
You know, we've looked at some the information that's out there, and I think the report and order mentions that between, I think it was 6 and 12 billion maybe needed. But having said that, you know, it is hard to predict the future. So we will definitely be keeping a keen eye on the applications coming in and see where we land at the end of the window.
And I do encourage everyone that's listening to share this information with other libraries and schools you work with, because I think it's important that folks apply early and they get those applications in. So eligible applicants are our schools, our libraries, and consortia of schools and libraries. So if you're entities that are eligible for E-rate, they're also eligible for this competition, but you don't have to be a current E-rate participant to apply. When we think about the school eligibility, elementary schools and secondary schools are eligible. And with libraries, it has to be a library that is eligible for support from a state library administration agency, and the library has to have a separate budget from a school. So you can't have a school apply and the library inside the school apply. So the library eligibility includes our public libraries. It could be our elementary and secondary school libraries if they have that separate budget from a school, tribal libraries, academic, and private libraries. A research library is eligible if it's not an integral part of a higher ed. And then a library consortium. I know in Texas, we've got some friends in Texas. I don't know if they're on the call today, but they're a consortium of libraries for a region there in Texas, a rural region. Library consortiums are also eligible to apply. So thinking about your libraries, I think most of the folks we have on the call today are with public libraries, and they would be eligible to apply. I think it's helpful to also think about who is ineligible. So schools with endowments in excess of $50 million, for-profit schools, for-profit libraries, and again, those libraries whose budgets aren't completely separate from the schools. And then if it's a consortium or a library that's not eligible for assistance under the state's administrative agency, they would also be ineligible. So as any grant, I know you guys have to go after those grants to supplement your funding. The first piece of it is determining, is your library, is your school eligible for this funding? And then when you think about you're eligible as an entity, it's then thinking about who are the eligible users. And this program is really focused on those students, staff, patrons who otherwise do not have internet access or devices. And I know that during the pandemic, many of you started working within your communities to determine what was the rate of folks who had internet access or devices. And so that data you collected during that time is really going to be invaluable as you pull this proposal together. So before I go on, is there anything on eligible entities or users that you want to add, Emilie?
No, I think you summarized it perfectly. Thank you.
And it's because you guys did such a great like FAQ and everything. You've given us the information. I think you've made it very easy for folks to apply, which I really appreciate. So you've got your eligible entity. You know you have patrons, students, staff that don't have access to devices. Then in the next piece is thinking about what could these dollars be used for? What's the eligible equipment and services? And this really is for those connected learning devices, tablets, laptops, iPads, Chromebooks that can be used in those remote learning environments. It's important to note that desktop computers and smartphones are ineligible for funding. And I know that's an important piece for our rural libraries because in rural places, often it is the smartphone that is how people connect, but smartphones are not eligible for this funding. Reimbursement is up to $400 per device. And one connected device per student is allowed. So again, this comes back to knowing your population and knowing how many eligible users you have, and then developing the budget to provide that number of eligible users with a device, with that reimbursement of up to $400 per device. With the eligible services, broadband equipment, Wi-Fi hotspots, modems, routers, all of those things, including cellular air cards, are included. Now, you need to note here that the Wi-Fi hotspot reimbursement is $250 per hotspot device. One hotspot is allowed per user. And I know many of you have been purchasing those Wi-Fi hotspots and modems during the pandemic. Broadband services are eligible. However, if it's that fixed internet access, only one service connection allowed per location. And there's no cap on this piece. Emilie, anything you want to add about the broadband service piece? Because I find it a little harder to understand than the other equipment.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to have that cap just so that you know where where you're at. But I think there's verbiage in the report around in the report and order around kind of reasonable amounts. So they estimated, I believe it was somewhere around $20 per month for a connection. But again, there isn't a prescribed limit. But we are looking at sort of the reasonable costs there for the connection, so that at least gives us a little bit of guidance of sort of where their expectations are around those reasonable costs for connections.
And I'm glad that they did not put the amount in there, because I think broadband service really does, the cost varies so much about region of the country and availability, where the devices and the broadband equipment is pretty standard because you can order those. So when you're thinking then, these are the type of expenses that can be covered in this program. There's limited support for off-campus networks. You have to demonstrate that there are no commercially available broadband internet access services. And I would suggest, if you really are thinking of asking for the support for these off-campus networks, you spend some time with the information that's on the website and make sure that this is allowable, because this is a little bit different and it's harder to quantify. The ineligible equipment and services, again, smartphones, desktop computers. It's also important to note that things like Zoom and Teams and applications programs are also ineligible, as is voice services. And then the extended and upgraded warranty coverage. So do be careful as you're purchasing, because often they'll want, I've found that sometimes providers will want to bundle that in to the cost, and that would not be reimbursable. And then standalone peripherals like cameras and microphones are also ineligible. So really what's eligible is the equipment for the user to get online and to really have that access. So that's the funding opportunity. The window opened last week, June 29th. There's a 45-day window, which is really a fairly short window to get all your ducks in a row. However, I do think the application they pulled forward is pretty simple if you know your data. You will have to certify that you've complied with all your local, state, tribal procurement requirements in doing this. And I'm sure your library has procurement processes, or at least your state library that you feed up to would have those procurement requirements. You do not have to conduct that FCC mandated competitive bidding process for this. You do have to follow those procurement requirements. So the window is open. So if you're interested in this, this is something you should immediately start working toward and filing, and not wait until that last moment. So to get started, you have to get your ECF portal account, and we'll have the link in the chat box at the end where we're sharing out the link for this. You have to have your ECF portal account. If you've already registered, you may already have this. If you haven't, there's a phone number here to do this. So you get that account first. And again, you have to have that FCC registration number and your billed entity number. And so, Emily, will most folks have these numbers if they're small rural libraries that are doing E-rate? If they're already doing E-rate, would they have this already, or is these going to take some time?
Yes, thank you for letting me chime in here, because I think just looking back at what you were saying about, you know, if you have eligible services or equipment that you would like to apply for reimbursement for the, or if you're planning on those purchases in the service dates that we have for the funding year, definitely better to start this sooner rather than later. If you are a participant in the E-rate program, then you should already, well, you definitely will have a billed entity number. That is a USAC generated number from your account within our E-rate Productivity Center or EPIC. And for anybody that does have a billed entity number and a user account within EPIC, we are automatically granting you access to the ECF portal. So if you already had access to EPIC, when you log into USAC systems, you'll remember a year ago we consolidated our login process so that we could support multi-factor authentication. So it's one password to remember, which is really nice. So you'll log into your One Portal dashboard, and you'll see a link to get to EPIC and a new link to get to the ECF portal. All of your billed entity information will be pulled over into the ECF portal. So you should be able to immediately start applying, and the link to begin your ECF FCC Form 471 will be right there on the first page that you see. Again, if you have been participating in E-rates, if you are an active participant who has received funding under the E-rate program, you will have an FCC registration number, as that is one of the things that we do sort of enforce as part of the E-rate program. So if you are already an E-rate participant, you are in good shape to start applying as soon as you have your ducks in a row for what you're looking for. If you're not an E-rate participant, go ahead and get your FCC registration number and go ahead and call our Emergency Connectivity Fund Customer Support Center. So that is a different team that is supporting the ECF program, or the Emergency Connectivity Fund program. They will help you create an entity, create a billed entity number within EPIC. And then what will happen is that information that's entered into EPIC will immediately be available for you in the ECF portal. One last thing I want to point out here. Once you have your billed entity number created in EPIC, the user, the actual person logging in, before you can have access to the ECF portal, we must have you sign the terms and conditions in EPIC. Very, very easy. You log in, as I mentioned before, you go to Epic. As soon as you get there, there's going to be a bunch of terms and conditions that you can have a look through and then accept. Once you do that, within, I think technically within about 10 minutes, you will have access to the ECF portal. So that's just really a very easy but important process that I wanted to point out there for anybody who is either completely new, or if you are a new user account. So if your library's been with E-Rate for a while, but maybe we have a new person, we can create that user account in Epic. Just need to sign the terms and conditions, and then you'll have that link to log into the ECF portal as well. So thank you for letting me just elaborate on that. So I just think that part's really, really important for everyone to understand.
Yeah, and I think often that's where I know I can get so frustrated because I feel like I'm doing it and I'm pushing all the buttons, and then it's things like missing those terms and conditions that halts it. So I do think that it sounds like you've made it really easy for those folks who have those E-Rate, have already done the E-Rate piece. The SAM registration will also have to be active, but it doesn't have to be in place to submit it, but it'll have to be active to be reimbursed. And my assumption, Emily, here is that if they're funded, they will be help, they will get some assistance in doing the SAM registration, or should they go ahead and start doing that now?
I would start that now.
Okay.
I would start that now because I think that does take a few days. I think it takes between 1 and 2 weeks to get approved. So I would just go ahead and start your SAM.gov registration. You will need I believe you need a DUNS number for that. So there are resources on the Emergency Connectivity Fund.org website, and of course on SAM.gov as well. But absolutely start. I'm someone who would prefer to start early. I think it just adds less stress at the end. So yes, go ahead and start your SAM.gov application. It will not block your ability to apply or your ability to have funding committed to your application, but it does start to become absolutely necessary when we get to reimbursement.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. I think they need to go ahead and get that SAM piece. We will be sharing this slide deck. It'll be posted along with the recording of this webinar. Someone had asked that question in the chat function. So once they get into and they're ready, like you said, they've accepted all the terms. Now they're into the application. So ECF 471 form, and it's a modified E-Rate 471 form. Has to be completed and certified during this window. The form is located on the portal. And it's important that you, as the user representing the library or school, that you complete this form. This should not be something that service providers complete for you. Anything additional on the 471 form, Emily?
No, I think you've summarized it really well. We've got content up on the website now, so there are some pages that tell you how to fill out the form. There's a video. I think it's a bit more simple than the E-Rate version of the form, especially since we don't have the C2 budget and things like that. So I hope that we've really made it as easy as possible. That was certainly our intent. And as I said, there's lots of resources available on the Emergency Connectivity Fund.org website for you to take a look if you do run into any issues. And then, of course, our customer service center as well are available by phone, or you can create a case actually within the portal as well if you need any assistance.
And as Emily said, this form has been simplified, and it will be automatically, I think we have a typo here, pre-filled, when automatically populated on the form. These are some of the questions that you'll be asked on the form, but I think looking at those videos and looking at that support information, as you fill this out, will answer most of the questions that you would have around the 471 form. You have to really, at this point, have information on your unmet needs and how the ECF purchases are being used to meet those needs. This is where you have that opportunity to have a narrative around the data to show the unmet needs in your place. And you really should be able to provide the rationale. So if you're saying you have X number of users that do not have access, you'll need to say where that number came from and how you determined that number. So then,
and I just wanted to, I'm so sorry to jump in. With the survey that we have on the unmet needs, the questions are really related to school students. So on the library side, you know, we aren't asking those specific questions. I don't think it hurts to have, you know, the information available if it does come up during USAC's review of the application, but on the FCC or the ECS FCC Form 471 itself, the unmet needs will be asked for schools, school districts, and consortia that have schools as members. So just wanted to make sure you're aware if you are a library or a library system or a consortia that only supports libraries, this question shouldn't show up for you.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So it's a little bit more simple than for the libraries that are applying.
Mm-hmm.
And then this, you know, the piece is how do you get the money, right? How does the funding flow? And so it appears that this is you can do it as traditional reimbursement after the purchase of the equipment, and that there may be some pre-reimbursement available with some. Do you have to have prior approval for the pre-reimbursement, Emilie? How does this piece work?
So the reimbursement, the first thing is, as you said, is that USAC needs to review the application and issue a funding decision. At that point, we will sort of provide you with a list of dates and including your invoice deadline date. Then you have up until that time to invoice USAC so that we can reimburse you for the funding that we have committed. There is verbiage in the report and order, although I don't know, you know, that there's verbiage in the report and order that if you need to receive payment before you are able to, let me say that one more time. If you need to receive reimbursement from USAC before you are able to then perform the payment to the service provider, you may do so. However, you must pay vendors within 30 days of receiving the ECF reimbursement.
So for those very small organizations or libraries where the cash flow might be an issue, there is some opportunity there.
Exactly. Thank you.
And I think this is what you were walking to, the detailed invoices required, and then you file for reimbursement. So that's the process, and it seems very streamlined and very focused. And so a successful application, this is just some of our qualitative from doing grants like this before, is to highlight the data, the percent of low-income students, the need for the funding, the reality of the place. And we also think if there's that piece, we tie this to that homework gap. But again, if you're a school, you might be asked more questions than if you're a library. Anything else when you think about folks pulling together an application to ensure it's successful? Any other suggestions, Emilie?
You know, can I just go back one slide? Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure I clarified one thing for you regarding the invoicing method. So as mentioned here on the slide, we will ask you, this is unlike E-rate, for the Emergency Connectivity Fund, because this is, an appropriated fund, we will ask you if the applicant will be submitting the invoice for reimbursement, or if the service provider will be submitting the invoice. I apologize for missing this before. The service providers, they do need to agree in their willingness to file a FCC Form 474. So I think that last typo, that last bullet point there just needs an update, and apologies for missing that. But it is really important that we do see if you agree with the service provider, if they are comfortable with submitting invoices for reimbursement of the funds, we do need to see that they have agreed to this.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that might be easier for some rule libraries to have the service providers do that step versus them doing it. So I think that's something they'll have to decide as they're going through it. Thank you for pointing.
Yeah, I have a feeling, yes, for service providers who are used to submitting, or used to participating in some of the USAC programs, the process is more familiar to them. However, we're not limiting the service providers to current E-rate participants. So even if you did purchase, particularly on the equipment side, I think that's where we'll see sort of non-E-rate service providers. That's fine. That's absolutely fine to purchase equipment or services from them.
Great.
And then back to the successful application. I think what you've summarized there is fantastic. I would say that definitely, read the report and order. I know it's long. It's long, but definitely have a read through it. Certainly, at the end they kind of summarize everything with the final rules, so that's a good resource. But it's nice to see how the FCC kind of came to their decisions as well throughout the report and order. I've mentioned several times about the Emergency Connectivity Fund.org website. Definitely go there. We are continuing to update the content on that website as more information becomes available for us to share. There is also a newsletter. So similarly with E-rate, we send a news brief each week. Highly recommend you sign up for the ECF news brief as well. That's available to sign up for from the Emergency Connectivity Fund website, along with I believe in our last few news briefs, we've also provided a link there for you to sign up. The last thing I wanted to mention as well, before we look at some of the the questions, is the FCC's website. They have provided a bunch of FAQs, and they are very, very helpful. I believe it recently got updated as well, so they are continuing to sort of hear the questions and update the FAQs. So I'm using it, so I would highly recommend that you all use that and refer to it, because they've done a really, really great job with clarifying any areas or questions that they've received.
And I think I agree. Go to those, take advantage of those, and to do this quickly too. Don't wait until the last moment because there is a filing window. I will stop the sharing now, and if there's any questions, we do have a few in the chat already, and some I think Regina had already answered or Sam had already answered. We will post a copy of these slides and this recording on the website, so they will be available. The application window is June 29th through August 13th, so you do have a little less than 40 days to apply. And then Sam has also put a couple of the links in here to the sites that we're talking about. And David Powell has a question here, Emilie. I was under the impression that ECF would also support an off-campus non-E-rate eligible location, and it could be partnered with to provide Wi-Fi equipment and service to those in need of it for educational purposes. Is this correct? That might be a real specific question that
yeah, I was going to say I can't quite, I think I might need a bit more details around that one to truly understand sort of what that question is. What I would recommend is reaching out to the CSC, and if you are already an E-rate participant and you have a account and you can create a customer service case within the ECF portal, you can do that, or you can just call them, give them your information. We meet daily, so we can, look through a bit more of the details of this one and then provide you with a better response. I don't think I'll do it justice based on the information that's available here, but we can, work to get as quick a turnaround as possible on specific questions like that I'm unable to sort of answer immediately.
Yeah, I think that's great. So David, I think reaching out there, you can then get an answer. I did have a note from another person who looked at this around the remote learning locations, and that bookmobiles and school buses can be used as a place to put the devices. So I know that one of our partners was really excited about that. So I think that was an interesting thing I hadn't thought about until they had sent me the note that that's one of the things they were thinking about.
Yeah, I think that is called out specifically in the order as well. So yeah, the FCC did a great job outlining the rules here.
And I think especially for rural places where the bookmobiles and the school buses are great opportunities to reach those rural communities. So I'm hoping to see folks take advantage of that piece. Doesn't look like we had any other questions. Emilie, I want to thank you for connecting and joining us today. Anything else you'd like to say, or any words of encouragement to folks?
Well, I did want to ask, I know I got some questions through an email. Is it helpful for me to go through any of those? Or I think you answered a fair number of them, but I'm happy to just kind of walk through those as well, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. And I don't have those in front of me. I think if you have them in front of you, or if Regina does, yeah, that would be perfect. We covered a few of them, but the ones we didn't, let's talk through those.
Okay, great. And I'm going to be looking this way, so sorry about that. So we did answer the question around if not all funds, if the funds aren't exceeded, will there be, opportunity for us to leverage the rest of the funding? And I don't have any more information than what's laid out in the report and order about, having a second window for previous purchases. But, as we keep monitoring the applications that come in, certainly once we get to the end of the window, that will really help us, and help the FCC understand kind of what their next move is with any funding that may remain. And there was a question around prioritization of funding, if there are more applications or the dollar amount higher than the funding amount. And so the discount rate, as you laid out in your presentation, is what we'll leverage. And there is we have the E-rate website, so usac.org. And then you can navigate to the E-rate section. The other thing you can do, I do this all the time when I'm looking for resources on our website, is I just put in Google, I just put usac.org and then start typing the thing, and it normally brings me to the exact page that I'm looking for. So if you want to put in usac.org and then discount rate, that will likely get you to the area that explains how we calculate your discount rate. So if you have any questions on that, please use that resource. And if you have any concerns about your E-rate validated discount rate for that year, please do include it in your application. You know, we have a couple of areas for you to provide a narrative. So, you know, leverage those if you have any concerns with that information that's on your entity profile. There were questions around limitations of number of devices and services. So we are, you know, looking at reimbursing schools and libraries for one fixed broadband connection per location. So that's really what we need to stick to when working through the applications. One connection, one connected device. Software was another one. So that is part of the ineligible services there. There were some questions I think you mentioned about the commercially available internet access. So I think there's a bit more information on the FCC FAQs website. The report and order as well does, oh, in fact, I got my answer from the FAQs, now that I say that. What must an applicant do to seek support for construction of broadband networks where there is no commercially available service options? So they need to provide clear evidence demonstrating how they determined that an existing or fixed mobile broadband network was or is not available, including by seeking service from existing service providers. So, you know, they're looking to see that you're trying to work with the service providers around you to get that access, and that sort of can be used as evidence there. And then define that geographical area, certify that you sought such service and providers were unavailable or unwilling to provide services, and then also show the construction is completed and the services provided within 1 year of the funding commitment decision. So, you know, this is an emergency fund. So while construction projects, I think historically tend to, you know, take a while, given the nature of this fund, they are looking to see that the services are, the construction is done, the services are provided a year after USAC issues their funding commitment decision. The timing for speaking of funding commitment decisions, what about the timing of those? So the FCC has laid out very specific goals for USAC for issuing these funding commitment decisions. So we want to issue 50% of the workable applications within 60 days of August 13th, the close of the window. So that's mid-October-ish. Yeah, for 50%, and then 70% within 100 days of the first application window as well. So that's all nicely laid out for us. We're working really hard to make sure that we can meet those goals. Can applicants request reimbursement prior to paying for a device or service? I think we mentioned, this is what I was mentioning earlier, that we expect that if you are seeking reimbursement from USAC before making payment to the service provider, that you do pay the service provider within 30 days. There was a question there around what funding sources are allowable to cover the cost of purchases for reimbursement. For example, if a school uses a federal funding source to purchase eligible devices for reimbursement under the ECF program, would that be considered supplanting? So there is specific language in this, on this in the order from the FCC. So we will not provide support from the fund for eligible equipment and services that have already been reimbursed through other federal programs. So just keep that one in mind. And we've talked about tips, and as I said, I've definitely, you know, we're working as hard as we can to make sure that we have resources available to you. And of course, if you don't find anything on the website, please reach out to our customer service center. If they can't answer you immediately, as I mentioned, we're working really on a daily basis to highlight any questions that aren't clear and that we sort of can't provide an answer to yet, so that we can get you an answer.
And I want to really applaud your team that's been working on this, because we've actually called into the customer service center and asked some questions and done that as we were pulling this presentation together. And they were really helpful, and the information is really helpful. And so that's wonderful, especially with such an emergency fund in such a short window. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time today to come and join us. I know it's a busy time, but we appreciate having you here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. And good luck, everyone.
Thank you. And then Regina, I will kick it back to you. I think you're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up. And as you're starting, I will find your slides and display your slides.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dreama and Emily. Wonderful to have you today, talking about these wonderful grant opportunities. So what's coming up? Network opportunities. Quick announcement includes our next Rural Library Network Conversations for Action. It's scheduled on August the 4th, same place, same time, 1 to 2 Eastern time, focusing on using art to engage young people, and also the extended community in social and emotional learning opportunities. Our webinar next month will feature Teresa Davis. She is one of Atlanta's best known performance poets, giving voice to the things that you've been thinking about, but probably have never really articulated. Very creative ways to collaborate with the youth and the community. She has an impressive career as an artist, with winning poetry slams and featuring at spoken word venues around Atlanta, as well as the extended, United States in the nation. So well known across the United States, connecting her work in urban and also rural communities. She is also leading, in terms of writing and performance workshops, and she's well known for that, as well as headlining conferences, especially across the rural and urban Southeast area. Next slide, please. So we're really thankful to have Teresa Davis and just join us next month at our next Conversations for Action. Please join us as well. The registration will go out very soon. So thank you so much. Just as a way for other calendar opportunities, please save the date, mark your calendar. We are anticipating a virtual Rural Library Summit on December the 1st. This will be our second second annual event. And so we're looking forward to that. Please also take time to become a member if you haven't already done so. Sam, if you could put that into the chat box there. If you click on that link, you can actually go through a brief survey that allows you to become a member. And the next slide will tell you the benefits. One of the benefits of being a member, we have opportunities here for professional learning opportunities for network members. If you recall, we feature a representative from the Association for Rural and Small Libraries that joined us maybe several months ago during one of our monthly webinars, to share some resources with the Rural Library Network members. We are pleased to continue this partnership and highlight their upcoming conference to be held in Reno, Nevada, coming up in October. This is a great networking and learning opportunity as well, and better yet, in person, right? As well as some virtual engagement offerings for those who are unable to travel. Well, here's the wonderful part of this announcement here. Save the Children is committing to fund 5 scholarships to attend this conference, including this also will include registration and up to $1,000 to cover travel costs for selected rural library network members. Okay. If this is of an interest to you, we encourage you to apply using the link. And Sam, if you could put the link in the chat where everybody can actually apply for this scholarship. This will be a competitive process, so please take the time to be thoughtful in your response on the application. All right. So definitely the link, it should be www.surveymonkey.com/r/ARSL conference RLM. Also, Sam, could you drop the conference link in the actual chat box? Let us know if you have any questions that actually is surrounded about that opportunity as well. But again, please join us next month for our next Conversations for Action. And, I don't know if there's any final thoughts there with Dreama or Emilie, but we are so glad to have both of you today on our show, and each one of you actually to join our show today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Regina. And that's so exciting about the conference and the scholarship opportunity. Sam has posted those links in there. You do need to be a member of the network, so make sure you complete the network application, which also is the first link there. So thank you. And thanks, Regina, for having me join you today.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, guys. And Sam, we'll leave this up for a second in case folks need to get these links copied. And then but we'll go ahead and turn our cameras off. Thank you, everybody.